Steve, hello, how are you, sir?
Bonsoir. That was Canadian, that was.
Oh, yeah, ça va. That was Canadian, was it?
That was Canadian. That was like my Quebecois.
What about Aussie?
Yeah, g'day, mate.
Interestingly, why Canada, Australia?
Why Canada and Australia? Well, why? This is the question. What is the significant backlash?
We'll come to that in a moment. I was going to kick off a couple of 3 jokes.
Oh, go for it, because your jokes are like legend.
They are legend.
Total legend.
Glass coffins. Will they ever become popular? Remains to be seen. When I die, I'd like to go quietly in my sleep, like my grandfather, not screaming like the passengers in his car. And buy a man a plane ticket and he can fly for a day. Kick him off the plane and he'll fly for the rest of his life. There's a theme there, isn't there?
Bad jokes?
Yeah, well, apart from that.
Apart from the bad dad joke thing, there is a theme, isn't there?
What would you say that is?
Death.
Yeah. And yet we're talking about Canada and Australia, but not linked to them.
No.
So let's cut to the chase. Populism, which has been on the rise for a number of years, seems to be dying a death in the last 2 or 3 months because of one person who we will have to name, who resides in the White House. He seems to be killing off any hope, in the English-speaking world at least, of populists getting into power. And I think it's becoming noticeable even to the populist or conservatives themselves. The question is then, are we overreacting? Are they really on the way down? Is that tide coming in? Are they jumping off the plane?
The first question that I would like to ask is who determines who's populist? Why is Albanese not populist? Why is Carney not populist?
Well, interesting with Australia, and I must admit, I don't know much about Australian politics. I was confused when I was looking at the results coming in. That's nothing new there. But the colours, so Labour's red, just like is it in the UK. But they kept talking about Liberal coalition, and they were blue. Well, the Liberals are the Conservatives. But coming from the UK background, that's quite confusing, isn't it? Because they're a different group. It's this use of Liberal to give a title that's not necessarily what they really are. They're quite conservative. And if I'm right, and I don't know if I am, they've taken on policies that are very much like MAGA. It'll be, we'll kick out the foreigners. We'll go ultra-right when it comes to promoting Australia, or in this case, I think it's Poilievre in Canada, being the same for the Trump-like party. And because Trump has been so big in the news since 2015 and he came to power in 2016, his way of doing things, his extreme being seen as popular to a group of people, that's the populist, and then they're throwing like little bits of meat to them saying, yeah, we're going to make you great again, but we'll basically make others suffer. That's what populism is, I think.
I understand that popularism is linked to a particular flavour of party, but I guess my question still remains, I think. What and who determines which party is the populist party and which party is just the political party? Why would a party that gets all the votes be tagged or branded with, let's face it, what is often a negative connotation? A populist party is always viewed negatively.
Yeah, because it tends to say to ordinary people that there are elites who are ignoring you.
But that's true.
Possibly. Interestingly, in the case of Trump, he's now become part of the elite.
But he always has been.
He keeps talking about the deep state is trying to destroy you. Well, now he's part of the deep state.
This is what fascinates me with what's going on in the world at the moment. I actually don't think anything is really changing at all anyway. And that we have still got the same puppeteers pulling all of the same strings. And if there's anything going on, it's the people that are in power are staying in power. The people that have got all the money are staying with as the people that have got all the money. And the normal oiks like you and I, and the equivalent of you and I around the rest of the world, are just nothing more than pawns in the big game. That's all we are. I don't think anything's really changing, mate. I think that the people in power have always had power. They will always have power. Nothing's really changed. And if you get into power somehow and you're let in through a back door somewhere, you just become like all of them anyway. Nobody stands up to the system. Nobody.
By the way, when Steve's talking and you're hearing some kind of bell, that's not tied to him.
No, it's not. It's my stupid dog.
Just let me go back a bit. There was a great T-shirt that came out in 2016. I didn't actually know at the time. I just found it researching this episode. And it came out just as Trump was getting into power. And it says, "Of course he hates me. I'm not poorly educated." So it was a thing, even with America, that people knew who were being drawn to the likes of Trump. And I've got this little piece here that talks about the populist surge, and it was written in 2020. Populist parties are on the rise across Europe. Unemployment and austerity, the arrival of record numbers of refugees and migrants in France, Belgium and Germany have left voters disillusioned with conventional parties and led to a rise of Islamophobic sentiment and anti-refugee views. In Germany, far-right leaders met at a conference. I think this is the Alternative for Deutschland, AfD, the one that Elon Musk famously made an appearance with on a video. Amid protests, French far-right leader Marine Le Pen, who's now, I think she's been banned, isn't she, for a while, told several hundred supporters in the German city of Koblenz that Britain's vote last year to leave the European Union would create a domino effect. And it looked back then that was going to be the case. Can't say that's the case now.
No, it's probably not, but I'm still not convinced that these are populist.
Trump?
I struggle with all of this because politics is completely disingenuous. Politicians are completely disingenuous. The system is completely disingenuous. The whole thing is rigged for the powerful and those in power to retain power for as long as possible by whatever means they possibly can. Whatever party are in power, whatever flavour they are, whatever background they're from. Once they have a taste of power, they do not want to let power go. None of them, not one of them. Now, we can flag that up and dress that up in our Western democratic liberal clothing, because nothing really changes.
Yeah, there is that, but then you got to say, okay, if the parties come and go, then who's behind them?
So what is behind them? I don't know that it's an individual. I guess I'd probably touch into the spiritual here. I'd say it's a spirit. It's a desire for power. It goes beyond. It's almost semi-transcendent. It goes beyond just normal humans. And it's that desire to be like gods. And whoever gets sucked into that vortex become like that. Nothing changes, Mark. Nothing changes.
Do you know about David Icke?
Not a lot about him. Wasn't he the lizard man?
Unfortunately, that was something he did say. I mean, he has spoken about what you're saying.
He was a football presenter, wasn't he? David Icke.
And then he started wearing purple in Hammersmith, yeah.
And then he said that he was the son of God or something, didn't he? And that was it. They booted him out.
Yeah, but I have to say, I think he's a bit cray-cray at times. That doesn't take away from the fact that a lot of what he said actually has proven to be correct or semi-correct, or it appears to be. Not all of it. And he can be a bit extreme, but he has talked about certain things about this control, and he's very critical, obviously, of the royal family. But you're sounding a bit like there's a deep state, and they are controlling everything, and everything else is a chimera to, distract?
I think that a deep state is far too human. I think that we are touching into something that is far bigger than us. And I think that we have this spirit of power, of greed, of lust, of whatever, of war. Whatever it is, there is something, it's almost like there is something that drives people once they get to a certain level in the human chain of evolution, or up that hierarchical structure. And I don't know what it is, but what I do know, having lived for as many years as I have to date, is that nothing changes. It doesn't matter what colour of party you have in. The education system is still falling apart. The military is always reduced in capacity, except for the time when they're getting involved in wars overseas that they don't need to get involved in. There is always a desire for more material stuff. There is always a push for more consumer spending. There is always interest rates going up, going down, stock markets collapsing, housing markets collapsing, housing markets going through the roof, stock markets going through the roof. It happens time after time after time after time after time. And it has done ever since we can remember. Certainly ever since I can remember. And I read enough to know that it has happened before then as well. So none of this matters. We are actually missing the point of what life is all about, focusing on all of this BS. Trump was voted in by the majority of American people that had the right to vote. He's come into power. The Americans have now got the president that they deserve because they voted him in. We got the president that we deserved with Jacinda Ardern. She was voted in by a massive landslide. She left before she could get kicked out. She got kicked out on a massive turnover and she was removed from power. Her party were removed from power. I can imagine that Mr. Carney, under the Canadian model, he has played to the populist mood. And it seems to me that people don't see further enough down the track to go, all he's doing is he's pulling strings because it is beneficial for him to get into power.
I kind of agree that. I mean, Nietzsche, when you were talking, I was just looking up the quote, and there's a couple from Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche. He said, a politician divides mankind into two classes, tools and enemies. And that's definitely the case. And he also talks, it's not quite aligned to what we're talking about here, but he talks about the will to power. And it's the idea that what drives living beings, including humans. And he believed that life is not about morality or ethics. It's this constant striving to dominate and assert oneself. And of course, they could be in groups. You can align yourself with other people. That's the basis of power and politics. But it's how do they then overcome obstacles? And every organization in history, every political party has tried to overcome the other to maintain power and have their countries in the vision that they want. The question is, can you keep that within bounds? And what happens when it goes beyond bounds that in ordinary times, most people would say is going too far. And then there's this slow erosion, always goes in cycles, a slow erosion where suddenly it's become acceptable now to be rude, openly aggressive, lying, giving no truth. It becomes 1984. Orwell knew this in 1948 when he wrote it. And the sad thing about 1984, at the end, they win, not wanting to give away the ending. You know, he famously turns around Winston Smith and said, I love Big Brother. He becomes part of the system, even though the back of his mind still tells him that this is wrong and it's BS. People just fall for it. Because what's the way out? People lose sight. It's so long now since we've had politics in some countries that actually are on an even keel that I don't think people now know what that is.
I would agree with you, Mark. I don't think they do. I don't think our politicians are capable of being on an even keel. They are completely, the ballast is wrong everywhere. And they have got no idea what it's like to have been sailing in a straight line at all, to stay on the nautical terminology. They just don't know. It's very, very sad. And what concerns me more than anything is that people vote for these numpties in huge numbers. And then what we get is another swing of the pendulum. And what we need to do is bring balance. We need to bring some balance into all of this nonsense. Tools that are being used. And the populace, the voting populace, are nothing more than tools. Carney has tapped into a fear, if you like, and I reckon it's a fear. It's a fear of what Donald Trump has said about the 51st state of America. You know what? Trump put up an AI-generated picture of himself as the next pope. The bloke does these things just to cause outrage, because any news is good news type of thing.
But that's the problem, Steve. When did that start to happen?
When did grown-ups start to look at this nonsense and go, oh my goodness, he's actually going to try and be the next pope? When did grown-ups actually start to go, he's really going to invade Canada? When did grown-ups really do that?
Well, you could probably go back to ancient Rome to that answer, or ancient Greece. You can certainly go to the French Revolution. Robespierre came to power and suddenly escalated very badly. You could say the same of Hitler. When he threatened certain things and then it happened. Unfortunately, there are people with no moral compasses, or it's very limited. And as soon as they wheedle themselves into power and they have nobody willing or able to stand up to them, the marked difference between Trump the first time round is that he had people around him, which the Americans like to call guardrails. That's not the case now. He knew this. He's put in place people who was not going to stand up to him. I mean, when you put a supposedly alcoholic Fox News host in charge of the Pentagon, what do you think's going to happen?
I don't know, actually.
Well, it already has. It's Signalgate, isn't it? I mean, they got rid of one guy, Waltz, already.
That fascinates me. You've got people that are passing messages on encrypted chats, of which they're foolish enough let other people involved in. In my time in government, we use Signal. We use Signal all the time. We pass information through all the time. There were groups made up all the time. This is not unusual.
But was it giving the actual...
This is not unusual for Signal groups and for encrypted chat groups to be used. Not unusual at all. Not in the slightest. So none of this surprises me. What intrigues me is that it just happens to be Trump's lot that have had this almighty leak. I can guarantee you, I would put a pound to a pinch of the brown stuff.
What's that mean?
A pound to a pinch. The colloquial terminology is a pound to a pinch of shit.
All right.
That's the colloquial terminology. The Democrats were doing exactly the same. I can guarantee it. Obviously, I can't guarantee it because I don't have access to that information. But I could pretty much guarantee that they've all used WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram, all of these other encrypted groups to set up work groups to pass information along, some of which I have got no doubt would be sensitive, not necessarily top secret, highly classified, but certainly sensitive, that you wouldn't want people to get hold of. And it always intrigues me when it's always every day when I get up in the morning and I open the paper, and I say that open the paper like it's a real physical paper because it still should be. But I open the paper and I read and I go, oh, what's Trump done now? Because I can guarantee that he's going to be the headline news. And I think, so, oh, yeah, that hasn't surprised me. What a surprise.
Well, here's the thing then, stepping back, because just to finish off with the leaked stuff, it's happened here in New Zealand with the education minister. It's in the news today, leaking stuff. If we step back, at what point do we go along the lines of people in Europe on Facebook? I came across a couple of quotes saying, I'm over the ignorance of the average American. Not all Americans, the average American, who don't know what's in the next state. They don't care about foreigners. There was this piece done by a newspaper, a reputable newspaper outside of the States that went into the States. And they were talking to people who voted for Trump for the second time round, wanted him to succeed, but now because of the tariffs and everything, they're now losing their businesses. And they're not necessarily, fun enough, in regret. They say, one of them said, oh, this has to happen. But there's going to be a point where they start to question what he's doing. Even his own base will start questioning what is happening here. But also the behavior, because the reason a lot of them voted for Trump, because they wanted others to suffer. They didn't think it would be them. You know, they had this DEI, which became a big thing. Most people didn't realize that the E is equity. And in America, equity is giving loans to people who are struggling, especially in the Midwest states, with farming because of the costs of farming itself. They've lost all those loans. So they're beginning to realize now, and of course this is the big thing, and this is what I originally said to you when I suggested this topic, FAFO, F around and find out. For years it's been giving it to the libtards. That's what the conservative, or in this case the Republicans, have been wanting to do. But now it's been happening to them. And what we're noticing is, on the worldwide scale, people outside the States are looking at this, because as you rightly say, it's been in the news every single day. They're looking at this, and suddenly, in Canada, Poilievre was expected to win, and in Australia, Dutton was supposed to win, and it's gone completely against them.
It has, which is interesting. So Carney, what did he do to win in Canada? He fed into the fear of Canadians around Trump to gather his voting base up. I'm not saying that was not a politically smart thing to do. It was a politically smart thing to do. But that's what he's done to secure. As a politician, why would he be doing that? He's doing it to gather power.
But what was Poilievre doing?
Poilievre would have been doing exactly the same thing. I think that we need a whole new breed of politicians who actually will sit down in a collegial fashion, politics that will sit round the same table and actually share good ideas, not for their benefit, but for the benefit of the people in whom they serve.
But also doing in a manner that we respect.
Oh, absolutely. And so we should be led by people who are willing to dialogue, who are willing to talk, who are willing to put aside their differences and say, Mark, I don't agree with your stance on this. This is what I see. It's opposed to what you see. Where do we meet? Where is our common ground? Where can we, as political parties, political opponents, find our common ground so that in my time in power, can deliver something that is going to benefit as many of our populace as possible? Because I am here to serve them. Where is any of that? We don't see it.
It isn't. And also, what we need to do is, and this is where I feel sorry for conservatism or the right side of politics. So ever since the French Revolution, we've had centre, left and right. It was all based on where people sat in the National Assembly when it first created in Paris. And we've had this structure in our mind that there are parties, centrist, left, centrist, right. The right has a historical basis to it and a very important, there are some fantastic things that they generally will work towards. And for us, that was the military and defence and fiscal good management. Well, with the likes of populism on both sides, left and right, when they come to power, they ruin it for the namesakes that tend to be underneath them. And my concern is that Trump will come and go. In fact, there's an argument being made currently in the Guardian newspaper by Simon Tisdall, and this is the actual title: "Tyrants like Trump always fall, and we can already predict how he will be dethroned." So there's going to be a point, either through natural events or whatever, that he will go. It's the carnage up until that point and how it will affect politics, because as soon as you have one side discredited, the pendulum will swing too far to the other side, which we don't want. And that's my fear. We can very easily stagger from one set of tyrant to another.
And I guess I would have to take stock of even that terminology. Trump is in no way a tyrant at this point, in 100 odd days in power. He's not a tyrant. Why would a newspaper be even promoting such a term to describe this president of the United States? He's not tyrannical. He's doing what he told the American people he would do. He's delivering on the mandate that they voted for. The rest of the world may not like it, but it's not our country. It's the Americans' country. Now, if it all turns to rats, that's absolutely fine. But it's this emotional terminology like this, the tyrant. And I think to myself, no, he's not a tyrant. He might become one.
Don't forget, the original word was actually, or the dictator, was a Roman concept that was given to somebody with supreme control over everything for 1 year. And then they had to literally step back.
But he's hasn't been given supreme control over everything for 1 year.
No, I'm talking about the original meaning.
But he hasn't got that. So why would we use an emotive word like that to describe an individual who is a democratically elected president of a powerful country in the world? None of this is helpful.
All right, okay. I'm not standing up for anybody here, and I know you're not. But look at it this way. Imagine that we live in a country where there is a written constitution, and the person coming in, let's call him the president, takes an oath publicly to uphold the Constitution, and then from day one does everything to undermine it and get rid of it or ignore it. What do you call that person?
But the thing is, you have to show that the Constitution has been undermined, that the Constitution has been ignored, and that you can prove that that is the case. And in terms of getting rid of it, you have to show that every attempt has been made to get rid of it. How has he tried to get rid of it? How has he tried to undermine it? How has he done that? Where is the evidence to show that that has actually happened? That was his intent. One of the things that you have to prove in trying to prove a crime is the mens rea, the mental intent of that crime. What is the mens rea of that? What is the thinking that's going in to drive that? What is the intent of that person? It's like trying to prove a theft. To prove a theft, you have to prove certain elements of the theft. Somebody has dishonestly appropriated a property with the intention of permanently depriving the other of it. So you have to prove those elements, the ingredients of that offence. Until you can do so, you should be holding your judgment. If we find that in 3 years' time, Trump has wiped out all of his political opposition through fair means or foul, has used lawfare, which is a great term, has used lawfare to castrate, emasculate, and override every other aspect of the law in the land, then we can have a conversation about him being a tyrant, a dictator, and being somebody who we should be very mindful of. At this stage in his presidency, I think that what is being fueled is way too much emotion, not enough. Let's just wait and see.
But how long will you wait? At what point does it become obvious then that that is where we're heading, if it does?
I would like to think that we would know when that point arrives, but I don't know that we would. You look at what happened here in this country with COVID. You look at the rules that came into play. You look at the things that were done, the lives that were ruined as a result of decision making that was rushed through Parliament under urgency. No votes, no blockings, all the rest of it. The amount of laws that were pushed through Parliament under urgency. You look at all of that. You look at the failures of all of that. Where did that come in and when did people react to it? Well, they started to react and then it was way too late.
Was there any successes in that procedure?
What, in the laws that were rushed through?
Yeah.
There may well have been. I don't know. I don't know. There may well have been. One would like to think that in every complete screw up of legislation, there's at least one thing that works, right? I'd like to think that there is.
Because what I noticed is that since the new government came in, when Jacinda lost, well, she actually stood down, when Chippy lost, what has altered? Has any of those laws been brought back?
Nothing's altered. Like I've said, I have got a very low regard for the quality of our politicians at the moment, not in terms of them as individual people who are academic or well financed or anything like that. Good on them. Great. I am limited in the ability to see in any of these people the desire to serve for the people, not to serve themselves. They seem to be quite happy to go to the pick and mix and grab their own handful, but actually serving the people. And that's what we need in politics. If you look to politics to save you, if you look to politics to bring you hope, if you look to politics, it's never going to happen. You're never going to be satisfied. And we're going to swing from left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. You know, and sometimes we'll TikTok and go left, left, or right, right. But you know, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. So it becomes very tiresome. And I feel that the way that a lot of this is promoted, you look at it and go, oh, come on. Stop using these words. Let's actually just lay down the facts. What are we talking about? We've got a president who's a bit of a strange chap in the United States. We've got a new prime minister in Mark Carney in Canada who has played into the fear of the populace and managed to work that to his advantage. You have got Anthony Albanese, the Labour Party in Australia, doing exactly the same thing. Rejection of the Trump-style policies and all of this sort of stuff. And so they are drawing on these fear factors in order to get themselves into power. I wonder how their reign in power is going to go.
Well, my question then is, because that's what Trump did, because they all do it, are there going to be any fears that we should be fearful for? So, for instance, if a person, let's hypothetically give a country that doesn't exist, but Trump has said, this is somebody who I want. And then there's a leader saying, yeah, okay, put me in power and you can have us. Now, you would assume that people living in that country may not want that. I mean, partition or exclaving, because there's a place that is outside of Russia, Kaliningrad, that used to be Königsberg, which was part of Prussia. But the war, it became a Russian, I think the word's exclave. It's outside of the country. Now, what if they suddenly turned around and said, no, we want to go back into Poland or Lithuania or whatever the country's next to it, and a party said, put us in power and that's what we're going to do. Now, I'm assuming people in there won't want that, or they might. So if somebody comes into, say, in charge of a country that said, put me in, I love the idea that Trump wants us part of his country and I'm going to agree to it, should that be of a fear factor if the vast majority say no?
Well, I would say that on a question like that and of such magnitude, you would go to a referendum, wouldn't you? And then you would make your point.
You would assume so.
One would assume. Now, when you look at Brexit, that's exactly what happened. We were put into Europe and more closely intertwined in Europe than the British people ever agreed to. They went to Brexit, they went to the populace, and the populace said, no, we're going to come out of Europe. So they've come out of Europe. And there are lots of people who thought that's the wrong move. Lots of people thought that. Lots of people in the Conservative Party who were supposed to be the Brexiteers and all the rest of it, all the pro-Brexit people. There were lots of people in the Conservative Party who thought that it was a wrong move. What's going to happen now? I would imagine that under the Labour Party in the United Kingdom, there's going to be a steady and slow slide back towards Europe. And you'll end up with Britain going back into Europe in some way, shape or form. Yet, even though the people had said, no, we don't want that. We want to come out. Unless they have a referendum and ask the people. And I think, it comes down to you get what you deserve, right? But you've got to remember, you're never, ever, ever going to satisfy everybody. You're never going to satisfy everybody. You're never going to, and there's always going to be the fringe characters that you can never satisfy no matter what you do. If you swung left, you'd never satisfy them. If you swung right, you'd never satisfy them. If you sat in the middle, you'd never satisfy them.
We've been talking about Canada and the States. Let's be honest, we're not talking of a fictitious nation. Canada's a sovereign part of the Commonwealth, and its head of state is the King of England, who's our head of state. The problem there is that there was no talk about this before Trump come to power. This has suddenly appeared out of nowhere as soon as he's become president, started talking about it. And it's like, why? Why suddenly from the get-go zero are you starting talking about Panama and Greenland and Canada, and he'll run for a third term, although he seems to have turned that down as we're recording. It's like, where's this coming from and what does it serve? That aside, that should be enough worry, because none of that was talked about when he was campaigning, I don't think. So a country as big as and powerful as Canada in terms of resources, that's a bit odd, isn't it? That suddenly you're talking of forced annexation, like the Anschluss, 1938. That's what most people, I think, most people who live in today wouldn't know necessarily about that. But those who study history would start to questioning, why is this suddenly a thing and why is it being promoted at such a high rate in American media? If
you had a typical politician who played by the same political rules and they said it, then you might need to sit up and pin your ears back. But what Donald Trump says, he does for sensational reasons, it seems to me. Now, I may well be proven to be wrong, but it seems that what he does is he makes the most outlandish statements in order to just get people talking about stuff for whatever reason. And I don't know what the reason would be to do that, other than the fact that that's just his MO, that's his modus operandi, that's the way he operates. If somebody who was a statesman was saying things like, I am now the President of the United States and I'm going to annex Canada, then you might need to pay a bit more attention to him. I'm not sure that what comes out of the mouth of Trump you should jump on as being akin to the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke and John type of thing.
What about the people who surround him and treat him as a god?
But you always get sycophants around power. So there's nothing new about that, and I don't think that should be the concern. I think what should be the concern is that we have a culture, a societal culture that reacts emotionally when they should just have been hold fire, gather the evidence, gather the information, and then see what happens. And I think that it's almost like chicken licking the skies falling down all the time. And it is wearing and it is very tedious and it is very, very boring.
I agree with that. And funnily enough, I had a conversation with a lady from Canada and she was saying that, did you know she lives in southwest Ontario, which will be Hamilton, between Toronto and Detroit.
Yeah, I have family who live there as well.
Yeah. And she said, the size of Canada is actually bigger than the States. There's less people. But in terms of geographic size, it's huge. Australia is as big as the United States. Both countries have 1 month of hustings and debating before the election. America, as soon as the election's over, they're going to the bloody midterms. In other words, every single day is politics, and that's the problem. It's just become a continual show in front of people, and it's promoted people to get attention because there's a lot of people involved here. They have to become extreme. And I think that's the problem with the American system. It's never off the TV. There's never a moment that they're not in your house. And to get attention, a lot of them over-embellish the story and cause fear, because fear sells.
Fear. And who promotes it?
The media.
The media. The media are culpable in so much of this. The media are the ones that should be held accountable for so much of this. They promote all of this nonsense, and they feed into it in headlines like you read. Tyrant, dictator, Hitler. You think, no, not yet. Maybe he will be. Maybe he will. I suspect not. But maybe. You never know. Stranger things have happened in life. And so we need to stop the nonsense. And I don't know how we do that. It seems to me that the only way that you can really have good politics is when you have this whole aspect of subsidiarity, where you allow the decision making to be devolved down to the lowest possible common denominator locally, where you have strong local and regional leadership, where you have strong civic centres within your local regions. And one of the points that you made, and it's come back to me, about I think you made it around about sort of stirring people up against migrants and stirring people up against these group of people and this group of people and any other group of people. You wouldn't have to stir people up against other groups of people if you cleaned house and if you got your own house in order. It's because we have got rampant homelessness in certain parts of westernized society. It's because we have got chronic health. It's because we have got crap education. It's because we have got lack of prevention of crime and disorder. It's because we have not dealt with all of those problems at home that people sit there going, hang about a minute, why should I be helping someone 20,000 miles away when you lot aren't even looking after that twat who's been broken into my house, stabbed my dog, nicked everything out of my fridge and all the rest of it? If the politics actually focused on getting their domestic house in order first, you would probably find that there would be a lot more domestic people going, let's open the doors and bring people in and help, because aren't we fortunate?
I agree with you. And I totally agree with, because I put my finger up when you said it, education. Now, of course, I'm in education. Yeah, I am an educator. I'm the problem, Steve. It's all gone to fucking shit since I've come in. The big problem, and again, it sounds trite when it's said, the word, it sounds arrogant. I apologise, but epistemic vice. We all learn, and yet far too many people are closed-minded, they're not curious, they will not have a discussion with a narrative that's not their own. Even after 13, 15 years of education, the West has become an absolute crap show of education in nearly every country I can think of. It's almost as though they have done everything, starting from the 80s and 90s, of bringing in, dumbing down national curriculums, not paying enough for the teachers, not funding enough for new books. I mean, think about it. You're putting people, young minds, in a system where every single day they're being fed with stuff, and yet they come out and it's like they're switched off. That is the cause of all of this, because then they're going to listen to any old crap that's put their way.
Yep, that's right. Let's face it, politicians aren't averse to using whatever tool they can in order to manipulate people's thinking and all the rest of it.
But they are also epistemic vice.
Canada, so many Canadians that I've met over the years hate the monarchy, don't want to be part of the Commonwealth, want to have a republic in exactly the same way as many of the Aussies are always pushing for a vote on the Commonwealth. And now all of a sudden, we're under the king. You can't do that. Don't be so hypocritical. I have limited time for them, Mark. They are a nightmare.
So do you then accept or not that the tide at the moment seems to be swinging one way, and I'm trying to, it's my left, it'll probably be your right on your screen, or that doesn't matter?
I think that it is really interesting to watch.
You're not going to make a comment, are you? You're not going to say. I think it is swinging away from populism back to the centre and the left.
I think it's always been populist, because wherever it's swinging to is the popular view.
Right, okay. I don't think that is the case. I think it's the wrong use of the term that's used in politics. Populist is basically appealing to the base mentality of quite disconnected people in the community who often want vengeance politics. They want people to suffer because they're suffering. It's trauma. I think populism is trauma-based because everything is based on being horrible to other people.
But then the populist tag is always linked to the right. And that would then suggest that all of those great attributes that you've just quoted are only virtues of the right. And that is absolutely not true.
No, it was connected with communism, the extreme left. It can be both sides.
But today it seems to be connected purely to the right.
Yeah,
if you talk about populism, it's always right, is it not?
For many people, it's more nuanced than that. You could look, if the centre party that talks about we are going to build social housing for everyone, and that seem as extreme, then it'd be populist.
I guess we're screwed, aren't we?
You know what I think the problem is? It's us as a species. We've been like this ad infinitum ad nauseum.
I know. We just hear about it more now.
We do, yeah, and we can't get away with it.
News travels quicker. You're bombarded with information. We're not designed to work like this. We need to be more like Siddhartha Gautama Buddha and just disappear from everything and just be content.
Sit in a body tree, mate. Find your body tree and sit under it.
And just be content.
But for all we know, because time has moved on, he may have turned round and did that to the Hindus.
He may well have done. Yeah, who knows?
But we don't hear that now, do we?
No, we don't. No, we don't indeed. But it's interesting to see what's happened with Canada. It's interesting to see what's happened with Australia. It'll be interesting to see what happens with strategic military alliances going forward with those countries. That will be quite interesting to work out, because that will shift potentially the whole stability of geopolitics within that type of the world, specifically within the Pacific, which will be very interesting.
I don't think we here in New Zealand really have to worry much, because we've got quite a big trade partner collective that's already going to be forming. Australia, Europe, Canada, Pacific. Suddenly China isn't seen necessarily as the bad guy. I think the problem is going to be how it affects America. The Americans have had it good since World War II. They have been literally on the top of the hill. And a lot of them that I've met are very comfortable with that and they like it. That's now, as Carney said in his first speech, that knitting together of two countries, helping each other in trade, those days are gone. So it's going to be a realignment. My only fear is what happens with the military collective, and if America goes isolationist, what is that going to look like? Because they're a big superpower and they've got a lot of weaponry.
Yeah, who knows what it's going to look like. I think one of the things that we would be very wise to do is watch this space. Just watch this space. See what happens. Let's not overreact until we have to overreact.
It might be too late then.
It might be. It might be. But I think it's better to react a little bit late and have a bit of a scrap than to not react at all or to overreact to start with.
Hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
Yep, that's it. On that happy note.
Ta-ta for now.